Hello, and welcome to the Badger Talks podcast, the podcast that shares interviews with experts from the University of Wisconsin-Madison community about their work, research, and a little bit about what they're like as people, too. I'm your host, Buzz Kemper. Today, we're focusing on Social Security and aging trends, and I'm happy to have as my guest Assistant Professor at Follette School of Public Affairs, Lindsay Jacobs. Lindsay, thanks for doing this. It's great to meet you, and I'm interested in learning more about this topic.
Okay, it's great to be here, Buzz.
So let's start with just the general sort of confusion. I feel like a lot of things that get bandied about, particularly in the political world, we get various messages about the viability of Social Security, where it's at. Is it going to be good for 20 years or is it going to run out tomorrow? And I'm glad that I get to talk to somebody who knows these things. Where are we at as you understand it?
So I'd say we're somewhere in between it's running out tomorrow and it's good for 20 years.
Okay, fair
which
enough.
is good. So just to appreciate how massive of a program this is and just how many people it reaches. So it's over 90% of people who are working are paying into Social Security, and over 90% will receive or expect to receive benefits at some point. And these include not only the retirement benefits that people might receive, but also disability and survivor's insurance. So it's also this disability insurance and life insurance program, along with what we usually think of Social Security as being, which is primarily the retirement benefits part. So as it stands now, it's always been structured such that the current benefits come from the current payroll taxes. Mm-hmm. So if you see on a W-2, if you have a W-2 form, there's about 6.2% of your pay goes to this fund, and then your employer is also paying that. And for some time, for about the last 40 years or so, what the revenues you'd see getting from the payroll taxes have gone past what is actually being paid out to people who are currently receiving benefits. And so there's this large trust fund that the excess would go into. And it got up to about $2.9 trillion at some point in anticipation of the benefits that people are getting exceeding what was coming in through taxes at some point, and that point is right about now. So a few years ago, the benefits that are being paid out are greater than the taxes that are coming in every year.
Okay.
And so to make up for that difference, they draw from the Social Security Trust Fund. So it's already being drawn from, and that's expected to run out in about 10 years, or maybe a little less than 10 years. And 20,
wow, so it's exactly
20,
in between 20 years and this minute. Oh,
yeah,
wow,
exactly.
Okay.
And so this was anticipated in some way, and the projections always are adjusted a little bit depending on how much people are making and how many beneficiaries they are. But yeah, it's been right around 2033. And so what will happen then, if nothing changes in policy, it won't be that the benefits just end. It will be that they will pay out the benefits according to what they take in taxes. So right now, they'll be able to cover about 80% of the benefits that people are expecting to receive, but not 100%. And so there'll ultimately be some sort of change that happens. That's what occurs if nothing happens. But in any case, there's going to have to be some form of increase in revenues, which would be a change in taxes, or some type of reduction in benefits. And there are a lot of ways to do that, and none of them are fun.
Right. Yeah, they all sound like they're going to be painful in some way.
Yes.
Well, let's talk a little bit about just the cause of this. It seems to me that the obvious thing I would think of is there are probably more retired people drawing in than there are younger people paying in.
Right.
Is it that simple?
Yeah, so that is ultimately the case, and that's due to not only increased life expectancy since the program's inception, and but also declining fertility rates. So there are still more people paying into it than there are beneficiaries, but that ratio has changed over time.
Okay.
So that's ultimately the cause of it.
That is ultimately the cause of it. Okay, and that certainly makes sense. There are also trends, if I'm not mistaken, of people retiring a little bit later. Instead of 64, 65, we're getting up into the 67, 68, if I'm not mistaken, retirement age. That must help.
Right. So yes, part of the some major reforms in 1983 increased what's called the normal or full retirement age. So it used to be 65 for people who were born before 1937, and then it increases with birth year, and to now anybody who was born after 1960 has this full retirement age of 67. And you can claim anywhere between age 62 and 70, but the amount that you'll get will depend on when that core normal retirement age is for you. And then the other part of it is that people are working longer. So you don't have to not be working to claim Social Security benefits, and people have started working a bit longer. So about 20% of people who are over age 65 are employed now, and it used to be about half that. It's for various reasons. But yeah, certainly people are working a little longer, and some part of that is due to that increase in the normal retirement age.
So you mentioned that the fact that people are working longer is due to various reasons. So I'd like to dig into that a little bit. I'm gonna assume or just kind of surmise that there are probably fewer super demanding physical jobs that leave somebody physically wrecked by 62, and so they have to leave. But what are the factors that are causing people to work longer?
So that's a topic that's really near to my heart too, is how the occupations that people are in have changed, and how that makes people allows for people to work maybe a little longer than they would have if they had more physically demanding jobs. So that is certainly some of it, and definitely increased flexibility in work schedules and work roles has contributed to that. But also, this increase in the normal retirement age of Social Security is some contributor. People are also in somewhat better health at older ages and expect to live longer. And so there are a lot of factors that go along with that. And for some it's not just that they're able to work. Maybe they have some financial need and to keep up a certain standard of living that's necessary. So it's not always for bright, happy reasons, but sometimes it is. People tend to hold on to jobs not just for financial reasons, but also that's part of their identity and part of their their routine and their culture. So it's a really rich area of study as a labor economist.
Have you studied those kinds of the psychological aspects of it? Because I'm at an age where I could retire, but I thought about the fact that I like my job, I like my coworkers, but also this identity thing that you bring up that's a big deal for me. Like I feel like if I wasn't getting up every morning and doing these jobs, both as an engineer and as a host, then kind of who am I? And
that's a very common reason for people, even if they're in the types of jobs that they can't continue doing in the same fashion, they might go to part-time, they might do different types of work, and just to get going. So there is like some theory there that if you don't use it, you lose it, right? And so the minute I stop working, my health is going to decline, and there is something to that in the research too. But it's but also healthier people are going to be able to work longer too. So it's kind of hard to say what direction that goes in.
Yeah. Have you dug into that sort of thing, the sort of the psychology of how much of a person's identity has to do with their work? I mean, I don't want to get too far afield, but
in my research, I've looked a lot more at occupations that people are doing, and also what affects any Social Security reforms that might increase the retirement age further would have on people in different types of occupations. But this was of interest to me. So as a graduate student, so I was at the econ department at UW for my Ph.D., and I was taking a labor economics class for the first time, and we were talking about retirement. And around that time, my dad was retiring, and he's about the same age as the professor I had for this class, who might be retiring now, but this was some years ago. And so I was asking my dad, who was maybe 64 or so at the time, like, oh, Dad, I'm studying retirement. What's behind your decision? And all he said was, in case you haven't noticed, I'm getting older. And he had this very physical job as a millwright, if you've ever heard of that.
Yes.
Working in factories, and so it's more intense. But at the same time, my professor of the same age is doing, I guess, what I'm doing right now in front of you, waving my hands and talking, and that's something you can do for a long time. And so that sort of difference and how that really influences and impacts what people are going to do at these very sensitive ages of when they're on the margin of working or not, has been behind a lot of my work.
Okay. Yeah, and I imagine one's passion for one's work has something to do with it too.
Yes.
I work
Absolutely.
with, we work with a lot of orchestras
Yes.
and opera companies and so forth in this business, and we work with conductors that are well into their 80s and they're still going at it, and it's somewhat physical conducting. It certainly has a physicality to it,
intense.
but I think they're able to stay with it just because it's a passion. It's not putting price stickers on items at Walmart. It's a thing that you're really passionate about.
Yeah. So it's your own personal passion. It's also your social circle. It's everything. Yes, that's so true. I've looked more at limitations that stop people from working, but I haven't looked so much at the pull that keeps people in. But it's somewhat. But it's there. Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Cool. Let's talk a little bit about the future, if you're comfortable doing that. What are we trending towards? So we've talked a little bit about the more physical jobs tend to be kind of going away. We get a little more flexibility now in our jobs. That leads to people being able to work into a later age than they could before. Do you see that trend continuing in the future, or bending in some direction? Or
I think that there is some limit to it. So I think when we're thinking about Social Security policy and changing that, there have been not necessarily proposals, but some investigation into what happens if we increase the retirement age further. And I think there's a limit to that, to how long people can work. And so, while there is this trend, we still have a life expectancy that's under 80 years old, and it can't quite go on forever. So I would say that while the changes in technology and different types of what used to be more physical work, technology that might make them a little more doable at older ages, it's not like infinitely easier to do. And so I would say I would have some optimism on that, maybe easing some of the strain that might come. But I don't see people, working forever, or this, but it really depends on your occupation too. So that's, but those aren't shifting enough to be really affecting everyone.
Right.
Some of us are still putting stickers on.
Right. Exactly.
Yes,
right. Those jobs are still there, and the people doing them are probably not going to be wanting to do that when they're 80, unless it, just prevents them from sitting home and being bored. But of the various ways, we talked earlier on in the interview about how we've got about 10 years if nothing changes.
If nothing changes.
And then you added that all the changes are going to be painful in some way to some groups of people. Do you see a solution or adjustments that can be made that, in your opinion, would be less impactful, would be a little less painful than others? What do you think is the way to go?
Right. So that's the key question. And it's sort of, when we say that in all ways it's going to be painful, some are going to be more painful for some groups of people than other groups of people.
Right.
And so I think what, you would see as being the ideal way to solve things would depend on how much you weight the experience of different groups of people. So, a lot of proposals that seem to have, some popularity in terms of how payroll taxes work would be increasing the cap at which they're taxed. So to get into the weeds a little bit, right now you're taxed that 12.4% between you and an employer up to about $170,000 of income. And there are some proposals to either increase that cap or have, keep the cap, but then increase or have payroll taxes apply to people who are making over a certain amount, like $400,000. Now that might take care of about half of the gap, but certainly not all of it. And there are maybe different ideas about how much that would impact the labor market, and there are all sorts of possible unintended consequences. But that's one thing that
Can I just interrupt just to clarify? When you say the cap is at 170,000, what I think you're saying is that they're paying 12.4% in between them and their employee up to 170,000. But if their income is $1 million a year, then that additional 830,000 is not touched.
Is not touched.
Oh, okay. That I just wanted to make sure.
And so that seems to have some political popularity, but you know, at the same time, it's already a progressive system in the sense that the more you pay into it, the lower your replacement rate from Social Security benefits will be. Yeah. So if you're about a median earner, say you've had a history of earning about $60,000 a year, inflation adjusted, you'll get about 40% replacement income when you get Social Security. Okay. If you're a very low earner, you'll get about 75% of your income replaced. If you're a really high earner, it might be a quarter of your income or something like that. So I guess it depends on people's taste for, you know, something that's already very progressive in that sense, being even more progressive, I think, because you wouldn't have increased benefits for people earning those. So it really just depends on people's taste for that too. There are some proposals, and I should say that a lot of this transcends sort of political lines. It seems like in the policy world, like there's some unity on like what the effects would be, and maybe some differences in how to implement things. But there are also some proposals that would actually make the benefits even more progressive in a sense, and make Social Security retirement be something closer to what it was intended to be at the beginning, which was just alleviating poverty at older ages. Right. And so that would be a reduction in the benefits for higher earners. Right. And this is without thinking about touching the payroll taxes so much, but it would compress that more. And then, you know, as a higher earner, you know, the highest earners, if you have two high earning people in a household, at the highest amount, they'll earn, you know, close to 90,000 in Social Security benefits now, if they wait. So, you know, it's a pretty high high benefit. And so there are some. And as I said, this transcends the left or right sort of politics. Right. There are some proposals to make it more towards, again, what it was originally as poverty alleviation at older ages. Right. And it's certainly very effective at that. Yeah,
exactly. Do you know the numbers? Because I remember reading once, I should have looked them up again, but I remember reading the numbers of what the introduction of the Social Security program did in the huge impact it had in lowering elderly poverty, poverty among the elderly. Right. Do you know those numbers?
Yeah, so I know.
Of course you
right
do.
Now, well, sometimes the trouble is that you know the number. Like there are some different angles you can put on it, or different types of numbers that are getting at the same question, but they might be different, like exact numbers. But the poverty rate among older people or age 65 for households is about 10% now. Okay. And if you just took away Social Security, it would be closer to 40%. Yeah. Of course, people might behave differently leading up to retirement. Right. Might save a little more. They might continue to work more. But if you just took it away, it would be pretty high.
Okay. Wow. So it would quadruple.
Yeah. It would quadruple. And so so it's certainly that was the intended source of it, but now it has really become a major part of retirement income. Mm-hmm. So maybe not quite half of households depend on Social Security for half their income at older ages. So it certainly has become much more than that. Yeah.
Well, it's certainly I know it's a huge deal. Like my mom is 103.
Oh.
I know it's incredible, right?
Amazing.
It's incredible. I know it's incredible, and and I know it's huge. It's a huge deal to her because when my father died, he left a good nest egg, and it's gone. He had easily enough to take care of her into her late 90s, but around 97, 98.
then it's
that
that's
was
pretty far.
completely gone. And
Right.
and
So thinking about that, Social Security, also at this life insurance, or this it's sort of longevity insurance too,
Yeah.
for people who are going to live much longer, which is
Right.
wonderful, longer than expected. The only downside is that you run out of
money.
run out of
Yeah.
money, and so this is a major insurance against that.
Yeah.
And certainly more so for women who have higher life expectancy, a little bit higher on average. They're major beneficiaries of that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. We don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to just give you an opportunity. Is there anything that you would like to talk about or you think is important, but maybe I haven't asked the right question to get to?
No, I think that the major impression that I get about Social Security is just like it's a big deal, and it affects everybody. It's a super unique program,
Yeah.
and that's incredibly popular politically. Nobody wants to see this go away,
Right.
No one wants to see this go away, and so I'd share that sentiment. It's run very well. The administrative costs are low. It's so it's great, and it would be, but there is some urgency there to do something, and I don't think it's as we said, it's not fun. None of it's which is why it gets put off. But
Right.
it will be a bigger part of the discussion in the next 10 years. So it always has been. I remember this going back forever. It's sort of shifted. Like there I think the ideas of how to change Social Security so that it is sustainable, which everybody wants. Those ideas, a lot of ideas have come and gone, but the issue remains.
Well, I hope, unlike things like climate change, I hope it gets assessed and addressed earlier rather than later, because you wait until you're just about ready to fall off the cliff, and then all of a sudden it's a huge crisis.
You always want information earlier rather than later.
Yes,
if you look at what happened in France over a year ago, they very suddenly increased their retirement age. It was 62, now 64, just sort of not quite overnight, but almost, and you can see the political response, understandably, from that change. And so I don't think we're looking at any policies that are so dramatic and so overnight, but there's an urgency.
Yes. Thank you so much. This is really clarifying, and I've learned a lot. I want to ask you one more question, though. What are your interests outside of this? Do you ride a bicycle or run marathons or raise gerbils? What do you?
I have done 2 of those 3.
Oh wow! Okay, good deal. I can guess which one not.
No gerbils.
No gerbils. Okay, fair enough.
I take my bike to work. I have a lot of intellectual interests that are, as you can imagine, in the area of economics and policy and politics and religion and philosophy.
Really, your hobbies are your work.
Super deep interest. But my husband and I have 4 young children, and so the hobbies. Right now, I guess would look a little different from what they might have. But
I bet. What ages?
We're all over the place. Our oldest is 10, and our youngest is 2.
Okay,
and
so that probably takes a little bit of parenting time.
We're working out that we joke that it's sort of like we have like 2 or 3 full-time jobs in a week, but we're always finding something to do, and it's always a very humbling experience. Every day. Every day there's growth.
Well,
but
I don't know how people do it. I've been married, but I don't have children, and I can barely keep up with my life as it is. And once in a while, I wonder, like, what if I had kids? I would have to just give up sleeping or something. I don't know.
There's some of that. There's some giving up of sleeping, but that's for a shorter period of time, but we're just in it right now. And
okay.
So,
fair enough.
Yes.
All right.
We're always learning.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we all are.
Yes.
Lindsay Jacobs, thank you so much.
Okay, thanks so much.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been really great talking with you.
You've been listening to the Badger Talks podcast. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Assistant Professor at Follette School of Public Affairs, Lindsay Jacobs. Please browse our previous episodes for other topics that may be of interest to you. The Badger Talks podcast is a creation of UW Connects and produced at Audio for the Arts recording studios in Madison, Wisconsin. Our music is composed by Bill Purdy and performed by the UW Marching Band. I'm Buzz Kemper. Thank you for listening.